I'm going to talk about Marshal McLuhan. I sent both the readings last week, if you recall, in an email. And many of you have done the Chomsky Wali reading, and many of you have attempted this reading. This is a much harder reading. And that's why I think the Chomsky reading, if you do on your own, you're a senior, you're a junior, you should be able to understand it. It's not that hard. But this is a harder reading to get, precisely because of the way it is written. The style of the language is so different. It's not written like a social science essay. It's written like a literature essay. He's quoting Shakespeare, he's quoting Yeats, he's quoting everybody under the sun, and you just feel a little lost, especially if you're just a Paul Econ major or something, and you feel totally lost because you're like, he's not quoting political scientists, and he's not quoting economists, and he's quoting like literature people. So what is going on? So that's why I thought that I would explain Marshal McLuhan to you today, instead of working with Chomsky. We'll get some time after the break. We'll also look briefly at Chomsky, but I don't think that's a particularly hard reading to understand, theoretically speaking. It's not so hard to understand, but this is theoretically some tough, uphill kind of stuff. So I thought I'd present. As tough and uphill it is, I think, for that very reason, and also for the insight it offers, extremely, extremely rich and interesting and worth exploring. It's like so full of, mazedar things that you really want to dig your teeth in. So, Marshal McLuhan says the medium is the message. The personal and social consequences of any medium, that is, of any extension of ourselves, result from the new scale that is introduced into our affairs by each extension of ourselves or by any new technology. That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. Extension of yourself and, social consequences, blah, blah, blah. It's not making any sense. But it will all fall into place in just a little bit as we go. The first thing to understand is how to read McLuhan. The thing is that he uses aphorisms. The way he writes is that he will use a phrase which should not be taken literally. If you take it literally, then what he's saying is not true. Okay, you have to read into what he's trying to get at. Often this phrase is not literally true, but captures the audience's attention by sounding counterintuitive, but yet capturing something vital, some vital insight. So if you know any other philosopher like this, like Nietzsche, for instance, writes like this. What's his name? Heidegger also writes this. A lot of German philosophy tends to be like this. So, and a lot of people who are sort of based in literature tend to write like this. Rather than being based in political science or economics, people who write, economic stuff are the worst writers on the planet. Political scientists are also really boring and dull. The people who write the most exciting and interesting stuff in terms, not necessarily in terms of content, but in terms of style and language, definitely come from literature and from the humanities. Okay? So, for example, he writes things like, the electric light is pure information. Now you think the electric light is not pure information, sir. I can only read information in light of the light of the light. But, and then he says things like, people don't actually read newspapers. They get into them every morning like a hot bath. Now, literally, that's not true. You can't get inside a newspaper and take a bath in it. But what does he mean? Well, these could be translated as, electric light makes people aware of their connectedness to the rest of society and their possibilities for doing things in new ways. Okay? That's how you really need to read it. Or you can read it, the physical touch, feel, and appearance of the newspaper is comforting and familiar to people who read the paper regularly, independently of the content of the stories. So if you're so used to reading the paper in the morning, as I am, right? If I don't get my coffee in the morning and my paper in the morning, I feel like, oh my God. And the first thing I have to do is I have to get up and take a shower, etc. If I don't do my shower, my coffee, and my newspaper, I feel like I can't start the day. I feel so terrible about it. It's like taking a bath in the morning. It's so important to me. It doesn't matter what is in the paper. I have to have the paper in my hand to feel it's normal. So that's the way you have to read him. In a certain sense, you have to read him not literally, but metaphorically. What is he getting at? Okay? So you have to read around it. You have to read through the passage to understand what's he trying to say here. That's the way to read him. All right, having said that now, Let's look at what he says about media. He's a Canadian academic. He's passed away now. Very, very influential in his day and age. A bit of like an academic celebrity. There are very few academic celebrities. Chomsky is like an academic celebrity. David Harvey is like an academic celebrity. And McLuhan was an academic celebrity. So let's begin by trying to understand what is media? How does he define it? What does it mean? When you and I think of media, we think of newspaper, we think of some text written, or internet or TV or something. But he wants to define it in a different way. He says, because all media, from the phonetic alphabet to the computer. So first thing you understand is that the phonetic alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and so on, ya alif, be, pe, whatever the language may be, but the phonetic alphabet itself is a media. The written word is a form of media. And computers are a media, are extensions of man. By man, he doesn't mean male, he means humans. Are extensions of man that cause deep and lasting changes in him and transform his environment. All right, so first thing you understand is media is the extension of the self. Somehow or the other, we are always extending ourselves. What does he mean when he says that we're extending ourselves? To give you an example, when I walk, I use my feet to walk. When I invent the wheel substitutes the function that my feet were otherwise going to perform. And I am able to travel much faster and much further. So in a certain sense, everything that we invent is an extension of ourselves in the sense that it's supposed to do something for us that we would have ordinarily done without it, and not as well without it. So by extension of ourselves, what he means is the things that we are doing, we want to be able to do better with our bodies, with our minds, everything. And when we do that, of course, it transforms our environment. Such an extension is an intensification, an amplification of an organ, sense, or function. So it could be an organ, like your voice, your ears, your eyes, etc. Your sense, or a function, like walking, etc. And whenever it takes place, the central nervous system appears to institute a self-protective numbing of the affected area, insulating and anesthetizing it from conscious awareness of what's happening to it. So in other words, if you're wearing glasses right now, Amna is wearing glasses right now, but on a daily basis when you wear glasses, you stop being conscious of the fact that you're wearing glasses. For you, you're not thinking, I'm looking into a lens which is looking out into the world. You're just looking out into the world, right? And even if the lens is slightly not cleaned in the morning, your eye somehow or the other adjusts to that and say, oh, no, I'm going to ignore that little speck here and speck there. I'm actually looking at the world. I'm not even going to focus on it, right? So that's how our senses kind of adjust to the extensions that we put around ourselves in order to actually get to what it is that we want to get to, which is see the world, okay? So, and that happens with media as well. It's a process rather like that which occurs to the body under shock or stress conditions, or the mind in line with the Freudian concept of repression. So in a certain sense, you're kind of repressing what would have been the normal function in order to have that extended function, in order to have that amplified function. I call this peculiar form of self-hypnosis, narcosis. In other words, we are so involved with ourselves that we are unable to see how the extension is altering us. A syndrome whereby man remains as unaware of the psychic and social effects of his new technology as a fish of the water it swims in. So fish is not aware that I'm swimming specifically in water, just as you are not every day aware that you are walking through air. It's just become such a normal part of your life that you blank it out of your mind. Because why do you blank it out of your mind? Because you're involved with the self mainly. Everything around you that you focus in on is something that you are interested in. So if you're just breathing air and right now you're interested in something else, you're not thinking of air. And you only think of air when you have a specific interest in thinking of air. So as a result, precisely the point where a new media-induced environment becomes all-pervasive and transmogrifies our sensory balance, it also becomes invisible. Just like your glasses become invisible to you if you wear them on an everyday basis, you just get so used to it, or your contact lenses or whatever it is. Or if you have prosthetic arm or whatever, it just begins to feel like that's your arm. Right? Just as you become used to whatever extension it is that you're using at that particular, or I'm wearing shoes which protect my feet, right? After a little while, you don't think about the fact that you're wearing shoes, you just walk. So in that sense, in much the same way, the media that we use, we become so used to that media that we don't even think about it as an extension of the self or as something outside of ourselves that's impacting us, impacting our environment and so on. We just we just move into it, we just become part of it, it becomes part of us, we breathe it in like we breathe in air, or we move through it like a fish moves through water without being aware of the water even. That's what happens with new media environments. Once they develop, once they become integrated in part of our lives, we forget that they even exist. We can't even see them. We know that they exist, but we don't see the media on an everyday basis and what it does to us. Media is anything that extends the body. So media can also be clothing. He's saying from clothing to the computer, anything that extends the body, the glasses that I spoke about, right? The shoes that you wear, the car that you're driving in. In that sense, he has a very broad information about media. I'll send you the presentation. Yeah. In that sense, he has a very broad definition of the media. It's anything that extends the self. He does not want you to think of media as being something that only shares information. He wants to shift that focus away from the fact that media shares information. Otherwise, I would have said, what is media? You would have said, oh, sir, anything where we share the news and other entertainment things, right? That's the function, but he doesn't want you to think about the function of the media. He wants you to think about it in a very different way, as the extension of the self into the outer world for some purpose. Media extend our senses, giving us new capabilities, and that changes us. Interesting. Media changes the way we share and consume information. How do you know what you know? You are not even aware of how the information travels to you and comes to you, etc. You are aware of the information, but you're not aware of how this information is now traversing the globe, traversing your society, traversing your inner circles and outer circles. And that's what he wants you to become conscious of. He doesn't only want you to become conscious of it for the same reason that Noam Chomsky wants you to become conscious of it, which is a different thing, because Noam Chomsky, in his reading, how many of you did that reading? Okay. Noam Chomsky, in his reading, is interested in the content of what is being stated on TV or other places, etc. Whereas McLuhan is not interested in what content is being delivered to you, but interested in how it is being delivered to you. How do you get to know what you know? Not what do you know, but how do you know? So media changes the way we share and consume information. Media is all pervasive, but we fail to recognize this because of our self-centeredness or narcosis, right? So basically, because we're so involved with the self, we fail to see how the self got the information that it did get. That's the translation of that rather long passage. So if media as the extension of man are a sort of thing that make happen agents. They make things happen. But they don't mistake them for make aware agents. They make things happen. They don't make awareness happen. So first thing he wants you to understand is that don't confuse the fact that you're really well connected into the media with awareness, quote unquote. Leave that subjective sort of judgment out of the picture. Just look at the process. These media, being extensions of ourselves, also depend on us for their interplay and their evolution. So we are developing, changing the media. The media is interacting with us. It's an extension of ourselves. The media, all the different kinds of media that we have created, are also interacting with each other through ourselves. Obviously not on their own, but as extension of ourselves, they're interacting with each other. And this interaction with the self and with each other is what causes the development and movement of the media forwards. The fact that they do interact and spawn new progeny has been a source of wonder over the ages. The fact that you get a pamphlet, from a pamphlet, you regularize the pamphlet, it becomes a single-page newspaper, from that it becomes a daily newspaper and so on. That's how it sort of births, every media develops something new out of it. It creates its own children in a certain sense. And this we've been discussing for a long time. So media as extensions of our senses institute new ratios. That's an interesting thing to say. Not only among our private senses, but among themselves when they interact among themselves. So what do you mean? What does he mean by ratios? What he means is that the proportion in which we share information, what information we share, how we share information, all of that begins to change by the development of the media. Think about it this way. I live right next to you, but you probably know more about, I'm trying to think, Roger Federer than you do of Taimur Rahman, even though I'm not that far away from you, right? Physically speaking. Geographically, I'm right next to you. Roger Federer, you've never met in your life. Anybody met Roger Federer? No. But you probably know his backhand is this and his forehand is that. Acha chalo unko chodo. Maybe tennis is not a good example. Cricket is a really good example, right? Who's like the latest favorite in cricket? Huh? Naseem Shah. What does he do? Oh, chakke, batsman. Okay. You bowler bhi hai? Yeah, I don't watch cricket. Yeah, what can I say? Acha, okay, whatever he is, right? You know about him, right? Have you ever met him? You're probably never going to meet him. Okay? But yet you know so much about it. But see the ratio in which, if that media didn't exist, television didn't exist, and cricket was not being broadcast on television and so on, would you know so much about him? Probably not. You would know more about the boy who lives down the road with whom you play gulli danda or cricket every day. You would know about his weaknesses and strengths and so on, but not about somebody you've never met. So it changes the ratio in which information gets shared, and also the ratio in ourselves, because the information we are bombarded with, and sometimes we share out as well, obviously is changing our thought processes all the time. So the way in which we get information changes us without us realizing it. A lot of people sometimes say, oh, it's just social media, it's not real life. But it is real life. When social media, people bombard you on social media with negative ideas, etc., sometimes it happens that you go into a depression. Sometimes the depression can be so bad, there have been instances of social media bullying that led people to hurt themselves, take their own lives even. You know this. So it's not just out there, it's in here. It gets inside, it crawls under your skin, it impacts you on an everyday basis. So and it changes the ratio of how things happen. Like for example, when I play music to a live audience, everybody's cheering and enjoying, and when I put the same thing on social media, be like, you don't know how to sing, man, get off the stage, you know. Like the toxicity of social media is totally like different. Okay, now for example, radio changed the form of the new story as much as it altered the film image of the talkies. Right? So radio changed how stories would be told as well. Like that famous instance where, what's his name, Orson Welles, I think, began to broadcast War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells on radio, and everybody thought that the Martians were actually invading the Earth. Do you know? People got so terrified when they heard this radio program. It was just a show. It was just a book about Martians invading and world wars and space wars and so on. And people who were listening to it thought, oh my God, the Martians are here on Earth, we better hide under our tables, etc. Like that would save them. But anyway, so it changes the way in which stories are told, it changes the way in which we talk to each other even. He's not trying to make a value judgment about media. He says, new technology adds itself to what we already are. It's an extension. So it's more advanced than before, but he's not trying to say this is better, that is better, although he will say that to some extent as well. But generally, he wants you to understand first and foremost what it is, rather than arrive at a value judgment before you even understand what's going on. All media exists to invest our lives with artificial perceptions and arbitrary values. So that's the first thing. If you think it was about awareness, it's not. It's about artificial perceptions and arbitrary values. I have certain values, I'm going to send them out on the media. You're going to be the receiver, etc., etc. It is real. Right, so arbitrary values or, artificial perceptions are real in the sense that when you imbibe them, it has a real effect on you. So even though what you're imbibing, yes, but it has a real effect. So when you listen to fake news, it still has an impact on you. Right? When you listen to, it's just like gossip. When you listen to gossip, it still has an impact on you about somebody else and so on. But is it necessarily true? No. So that's media as well. Media is like that. Think of it like kind of like gossip. It may also be true. Some of it may be true. Maybe all of it is true. Maybe all of it is false. So, but that's what media is. It's somebody's opinion being pushed onto you, right? And that opinion may or may not conform to facts, but it doesn't have to, is what he's trying to say. It doesn't have to. Societies have always been shaped more by the nature of the media by which men communicate than by the content of the communication. Very important quotation. It should have been at the top, not at the bottom. What does he mean here? So what he means is, this is what he means by when he says, medium is the message. Yes, the medium is the message is right here. He means that it's less important, at least as far as his analysis is concerned, what is being shared, and it is more important how it is being shared and how it is being communicated. Okay? So what, he wants to leave the question of what, put it in the trash can, and he's exaggerating his argument. Of course, what is important? He's never said it's not important. So whenever somebody asks him this question, sir, isn't content important? He says, of course it's important. But he doesn't want to examine content right now. He wants to examine whatever the content is, how is it shared? So let's take what and put it in the trash can just as a mental experiment. And just think about how does it get across? And then we'll have a more interesting story to tell. Now, the how is that you have to understand that the media is not one thing. Okay? If the media is not a newspaper or a story in a newspaper, or it's not a channel, or it's not a YouTube channel. If you're into YouTube channels, there's one by a good friend of mine. It talks about politics and philosophy and so on. Looks a lot like me. His name is also Taimur Rahman. Do subscribe. It's not about one channel or one, it's not even about one social media platform like Twitter or Facebook or whatever. It's about the media environment as a whole. So I put this image in like the media environment is like the air. It's everywhere. And we are like breathing it and breathing out from it, right? That's what we mean by the media environment. Everything. And that's what he really wants you to sort of think about. Not a newspaper. Unlike Chomsky, he doesn't want you to think about the New York Times and the coverage of the Indochina war. He wants you to think about how do people get information and consume information. All media work us over completely. Oof. And here you were thinking, sir, I don't really pay attention to the media. You have no idea how much attention the media pays you and how much it impacts you. You have no idea. It's like saying, sir, I don't really breathe air. You have no idea how much air you're breathing and how much the media you're interacting with. They are so pervasive in their personal, political, economic, aesthetic, psychological, moral, ethical, and social consequences that they leave no part of us untouched, unaffected, unaltered. And what language are you speaking? And what was the language of your forefathers? There you go. And what about if you could not speak English? Would you be sitting in this classroom? The medium is the message. See how important the medium becomes? It becomes the message. It gives you access or cuts you off from having access to so many different things. See my point? Or his point rather? Okay. So language is one thing. Because of English colonialism, we learned the English language, etc. We had about 200 years of colonialism and so on. So language is one thing. It's a medium. But it's not just language. Let's today think about the way we dress. The way I'm going to think about the way I'm dressed. Okay? Why am I wearing red? Why do I have 2 pockets? Collared shirt, whatever. Why didn't I wear a shalwar kameez? Or a dhoti? Or a lehenga? Or anything else, right? I could have worn, a number of, oh, you're wearing a shalwar kameez. Well done. Okay? So the point is that our aesthetic sense, our fashion sense. Why did I get my hair cut the way I did, right? Do you think that's something that I took an individual decision? I went to the barber and I said, wait a second, 13 inches, 3 inches from here, 2.5 inches from, no. It's all about the aesthetic that I picked up. As a kid, maybe I was watching MTV and there was, who was on MTV back in the day? I can't remember, but you get the point. I was watching somebody and I thought, oh, this is the way hairs ought to be. If I was in the 80s, I would have probably a mullet or something, right? And I think that's so cool. Today, if I came into class with a mullet, you're like, oh, I'm not taking that class, man. Guy has no fashion sense. Oh, please, he's so out of date, right? So the way in which we dress, the way in which we walk, the way in which we talk, all of this is informed by the information we have received. It impacts us so much that we don't even realize how much it impacts us. Well, there's no such thing as isolated thought. You could have an original thought, you could start a new trend or something, a new style or whatever. Maybe you'll take your mung out from here, or maybe you take a mung out from here, I don't know. What you would do, you start a new trend, nobody's done it before. But then when you start it, when it gets on the media, when it extends outside of yourself, which it inevitably has to do and will do, then it begins to impact everybody around you. Who are you? Where are you placed? To what extent are you able to extend that out from yourself? All of that is what we need to sort of think about. It would mean that whatever you introduce, which is new, is itself, on the one hand, a synthesis of things that are already present. It's maybe a new combination of things that are already present. Creativity isn't about starting completely from scratch. It's always about combining and recombining what already exists, number one. Number two, you may add something new to that, a different thing, like you create a new scale. This morning I was looking at the Japanese scale on the guitar, etc. You may add something new to that. Now, if I do an Urdu melody on a Japanese scale, it will be new. People are like, what is this? Right? It's very creative, or maybe they're saying, oh, this is really pathetic. In either case, it will be new, and but it will be a combination of things. So in different combinations and permutations, we're introducing something. But when I introduce that, somebody else will listen to it. When they listen to it, they get impacted by it. So in that sense, what we're saying is that the media are impacting you all the time. You are also impacting the world all the time. It's a two-way street. Look, that's really an excellent analysis about nostalgia and media. But what are you examining? Shame. No. About the media. Think about it. Broaden it. You're examining one thing, shame. What is that? Or nostalgia. What is that? Okay, and what is that? It's the content of the media. That's exactly what this, you see, you proved him right. We always go to the content because we are so used to just breathing the media as it exists for us that we never think about how we're breathing what we're breathing. We always think about, what we're breathing, but we don't think about how we're breathing. So that's what he wants you to look at. Forget about the content for a while. Okay, think about how it moves. It's not an authentic extension of yourself. An extension, by definition, will be slightly inauthentic. If I wear glasses, the authentic fact is that my eyes are weak, which they are. Right? I rarely wear glasses, except when I'm reading, etc. But the authentic self sees everything a little blurry. But when I wear glasses, it becomes clear. So an extension, by definition, is not the self. It's an extension. So it's changing the self. So when you project yourself on Twitter, or you project yourself on Facebook or TikTok, you project what you want to project, what you want to project. I project myself as the defender of the poor and downtrodden Marxist revolutionary, correct? Whether I am or I am not, that's a separate matter, correct? Or the extent to which I am or I am not is a separate matter, correct? And you may present yourself as a fashionista or I don't know, whatever, a great footballer or cricketer or whatever it is, right? But that's a projection. It's your projection. And your projection of yourself is who you want to be, perhaps. Or who you want others to think you are already. But it's not who you actually are. That's the key. So projections are always, what we put on social media is a projection, not the self. I think that's an excellent observation. And in that sense, I think that McLuhan, in a certain sense, the way in which Western intellectual discourse shifted from analysis of the content to analysis of the form is kind of prefigured here by him. Although it's already happening even in the 60s, etc., with Foucault and many others, etc. But I think here it's postmodernism would also, I think, I'm not sure whom you read, but they would also argue that the text needs to be understood or examined or deconstructed independent of the author. The text has a life of its own outside the author. So you may have written the text out of a background because you have this certain background, so you wrote a text. But once you've written the text, postmodernists say, it has a value which is independent of the author. It doesn't matter who you are. Now it is its own beast. It has its own life. Okay? So in a certain sense, what you're doing is actually quite pre-postmodern. Because in the pre-postmodern period, when you had a great book, Thomas Hardy or whatever, you actually looked into the life of Thomas Hardy to find out why he wrote the things he wrote. That's the old way of looking at literature. Today, you have to separate the author from the text itself. In real postmodern literary criticism, you'll have to separate that, and the text has to stand on its own and mean what it says on its own. And but where you are right, so that where you are not so right, but where you are right is to say that what is important to look at in the text is not just the content of the story, what happened, who cheated on whom and that sort of thing, but also to look at how it is written, how it is communicating. What is the form of its communication? Protagonist, antagonist, grammar, whatever usage, etc. That becomes more important than the moral of the story. Okay? So there you are quite right. All right? So the medium is the message. Any understanding of social and cultural change is impossible without a knowledge of the way media works as environments. So we want you to focus not on one media, but on media environment as a whole. Very important. Like, what is the media environment today? Of course, it is internet, electronic media, television, movies, films, all of that. Radio, newspapers, all of that is the media environment. Okay? So all media are extensions of some human faculty, psychic or physical. All right. Now, I put these two videos here because I wanted to explain this saying, we become what we behold. What he means is we shape our tools, the tools we use, the extensions that we create are extensions that we have created. But then our tools shape us. When you wear those extensions, or whatever it is, they shape how you become. So I thought I would play two videos to make that point forcefully, from one of my favorite films called 2001: A Space Odyssey. Here we go. Scary. Next clip. देखो, in the first scene, he picks up a little bone and he's able to he's just playing around with it, and he realizes it can be used to break bones, right? And then it can be used to hunt animals, which is what he begins to do. So it changes the relationship between nature and man, between animal and man. Humanity becomes more powerful over the animals that are much stronger than it because of the tools that humanity is using. And then it also begins to change the relationship within humanity. For example, these two groups of apes are fighting over what? A water hole. They're fighting over water. So if you saw the previous scene, in the previous scene, the ape that gets beaten up actually beats up the ape that beats him up over here, okay? And takes and monopolizes that water hole. But then these apes that are excluded now, because they pick up bones, these big bones, etc., they come back for the water hole, they fight it out. And you notice one very important thing. The other ape is hunched over. And now because he has to use the bone to hit, he stands taller to hit from above. You see? And he hits, and he obviously easily wins because he has a weapon and the other ape does not. And the whole tribe of apes that previously had the water hole no longer have that water hole. And obviously this group of apes that now has the water hole is able to dominate and obviously later on thrive. And as it thrives, it develops the tools that it has. And the tools that it has lead all the way up. When he throws the bone in the air and is floating and coming back down, it turns into a satellite or a spaceship or whatever, right? That spaceship is also the bone was the extension of the hand or the extension of the fist or whatever. And now the spaceship is just the extension of the bone. And it has completely transformed the relationship that humanity has with its own planet, with itself. It's now going all over. Well, it's no longer going anywhere, but it was at that time when he made this movie. It's going all over space and exploring, aside from Elon Musk. Going all over space and exploring new planets and, exploring the moon and so on and so forth. So see how it has transformed societies. The relationship of different societies to each other also transforms depending on the tools that those societies have. So, and the tools can also be weapons. So you throw a stone, that's a weapon, and then you learn how you can fit that stone into a barrel and throw it as a gun or as a missile or something. It's the same extension. So the tools that we create then also shape us. Well, when the apes existed, there was no capitalism. There was not even any money. So while this is called, let me put it to you this way. So while domination and struggle, etc., that sort of thing has existed, to equate that with capitalism would not be correct. Although in capitalism there is competition for domination, etc., etc., and before capitalism that also existed, but to equate the two would be to miss out the fact that capitalism itself is a product of a very recent modern transformation and is itself a different economic system from economic systems that existed in the past. We would lose the specificity of capitalism if we were just to all put it under quote-unquote domination. Every social system, whether it's capitalism or some other system, requires both things, domination as well as cooperation. It's not the case that if capitalism only knew how to dominate and didn't know how to work together to achieve a certain end, then capitalism would not have been able to be successful at all. Colonialism would not have been successful. Nationalism would not have even existed, because nationalism is like a big collectivity where you get together and you say, all right, we're going to declare war on the other side, right? So you see there that there is simultaneously cooperation and competition going on throughout human history, okay? So we don't want to confuse those things by just lumping them together in a non-nuanced way. Okay, so societies have always been shaped more by the nature of the media by which men communicate than by the content of the communication. So now listen, just as in the previous film thing, I was not so much interested, or I didn't want you to be so much interested in what the specific tool was. I'm not interested whether the tool is a bone or it's a spear or it's a bow and arrow or what it is, but to understand the fact that the tools we create us in turn, change us. That's what I need you to understand. So in much the same way, the media that we create, we have created the media, but it also creates us. Just like the tool we create creates us, the media that we create also changes and creates us, recreates our society. And it does that in a certain sense. As the tool changes, it's the change in the tool that changes the relationship. So much the same way, media is a tool. As media develops and becomes a stronger and different tool, its power over society and the way in which society communicates, shares information, and processes that information undergoes a dramatic, revolutionary transformation. So I'm not interested, so again, I'm repeating a lot, but this is the central point of the argument. I'm not interested in the content of the communication, but in how the tools by which communication occur. Whether it occurs with a bone, that's a tool, or a spaceship. Now, the old media is like a bone, and the new media is like a spaceship. That's what we need to understand. So, if we were to take human history, and we were to divide human history into certain periods, where we could say certain kind of media, if we were to divide human history in accordance with the media that existed, what would we get? If we went all the way back, we would go to what he calls the acoustic age. There's no written word. There's no concept of writing anything. How do you communicate? You talk. How is it that you talk? You learn to talk by taking one of your organs inside your throat, shaping your mouth in different ways. It's just meant for you to breathe, but you were able to make certain sounds with it. And you began to sculpt and, sort of change those sounds to communicate different ideas. The first language may have just been ha, or whatever, right? Ha or na. That's the first thing you got to learn, right? Yes and no. But then you begin to make it more and more sophisticated. You begin to change it. Ha or na, You begin to sculpt it. You begin to sculpt the words. And the first people who would probably be considered, and still today, the people who are considered eloquent, who can speak so well, were always greatly honored in those societies, precisely because they're able to sculpt with their voices, with their vocal cords or whatever, sounds and whatever that is just that communicates new ideas in a more nuanced and complicated way. Which is why we love musicians and vocalists so much. We don't love musicians as much as we love vocalists. Vocalists we adore, especially if they can sing well. But otherwise we adore them as well. And when we like a musician, when do we like a musician? When the musician is able to play in a way that sounds like he's talking to you. Hakini? Sounds like he's talking to you. That's what you say, oh my God, when he plays the guitar, he makes it sing. Oh, what an expression. So you see, that's the first sort of age. It's the acoustic age. Then we get into the written age where you begin to write things down. And that's a huge advance for humankind. The Phoenicians and the Egyptians and the Babylonians are the first people to develop it. So writing makes it now possible to do what? To separate the author from the written text, from what the author said. Now I can read Plato. I've never met him. The guy died like 2,600 years ago, and we're still reading him. And not only are we reading him, I'm forcing you to read him as well in Western political philosophy. Oh my God, he's dead. But obviously in the acoustic age, anybody who died, you couldn't talk to them anymore. But so now writing gives you immortality. It makes you immortal. Okay, maybe it doesn't make you immortal, but it makes your ideas immortal. Absolutely, there's an oral culture, but somebody is there to tell the story. And how they feel about that story when they're telling, maybe I'm telling a story which I heard from someone else. But when I'm telling that story, who's telling it? I'm telling it. And when I'm telling it, the intonation of my voice, everything in my voice, my emotion is carried to you. And it's me being carried to you. And without any extension. Just straight from my vocal cords into your eardrums. That's how you're getting it. Right? That's why I don't like to put on a mic. I'm like, I want to go back into the, acoustic age when I'm talking directly to you. Right? You see? So that's the thing. It's really organic right there. But when you have a text, boom! Suddenly, the author disappears. The text comes forward. That's what postmodernists like to talk about. How the author and the text depart with the written age. So now we get the written age, and McLuhan likes to call this the mechanical age. I'll explain why in just a second. Then we get into the age of mass production. With mass production, now we can reproduce the written word in big quantities. We can produce it on paper. Now, gaur kare, when you said about TikTok, we don't talk like that on TikTok. You know, we don't, the way we talk on TikTok, we don't talk like that in real life. That's so true. But the way we look at text also is so different. We have to read into text. Like, for example, if I say, the course deals with an extremely important yet relatively less visible connection. It means something slightly different from saying, the course deals with an extremely important yet relatively less visible connection. How much difference is there in the way you're hearing it? It's the same words, but the way you're hearing it completely transforms. The emphasis, what do you emphasize, what do you not emphasize, how do you emphasize, completely transforms it. So the text takes all of that away. All of that information is taken away. Plus there's all this information about the way I'm standing, the way I'm talking to you, my posture, all of that is gone. All you have now is the text. So that's what happens in TikTok and Facebook and Twitter, is that there's no person there. There's only the text, right? The person is gone. The emotion is gone. The intonation is gone. The body language is gone. So you don't know whether I'm saying I was neutral in the sense that, look, I was neutral. Or you're like, I was neutral. You don't know. You know this story, right? Of course, everybody knows this story, right? You don't know how I'm saying it. So you are going to read into the text the way you think of me and read into it what you think of me already. So that's very interesting. You're filling in the blanks there as you go along. So anyway, written age comes to mass production. Then we get into this new age, which is the transition there is, of course, television, etc., which is the global village electronic age. Let's just call it the electronic age, okay? And you can understand what that is. Electronic age means that we have electronic media now, which includes radio and television and internet, everything else. Internet didn't exist when he was writing, but he already understood what's going to happen, so, okay? And he already understood that with the electronic age, you're going to have what he called a global village. Yes, he's the one who coined that term, global village, which we all use today and say, since globalization, we become a global village. There's just like a funny thing they put in that he used to appear quite a bit on TV and on TV debates. And go to YouTube and type Marshal McLuhan and watch his debates because they are beautiful. It's just such a pleasure to listen to him because he's so eloquent, you know, he's really quite brilliant. Okay, so yeah, those were, I put some graphics there just for fun, etc. Right, thank you for appreciating. All right, dekho aag bhi jal rahi hai, you see that there? Look, he's telling the story over a fire, you see? How much difference it makes to tell that story over a fire even.